welcome back to Between Two Wings. I'm your host, Emily Norman, and today we have Petter Hörnfeldt with us. You might know him better as Mentour Pilot. He is very fond of sharing his experiences with all of us who are interested in aviation, so we can learn from what he's experienced and also just educate us on the industry itself. He's also a line training captain for a major airline in Europe, but we're going to dive into a lot of these things here in a little bit. So first and foremost, Petter, thanks so much for coming on our show.
Emily, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, and I'm really looking forward to chat about whatever you feel like chatting about.
Yeah, there's always so much we can talk about. So unfortunately, we can't dive into everything, but yeah, I think we'll hit on a few good things here. So starting off though, I just have a very simple background. I'm in instrument training, so I barely ever get to see outside. This was actually one time where I told my instructor that I wasn't going to put the hood back on until I took a photo because it was a nice VFR day, but not much else story there. But you've got something pretty fascinating behind you. What's going on there?
Well, this is my home away from home. This is the cockpit of the 737-800, which I'm currently operating.
So what all have you done with the 737-800? It sounds like you've not only flown them, you are now moving towards the process of allowing other people to fly them through all the checks of being a line train captain and the other things as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, my role at the moment is as a line training captain, like you pointed out. That means that I'm flying with new pilots that haven't flown on the type before, who's coming in Europe. That means they can come straight from flight school and into one of these. Because we don't have the 1,500-hour rule that you have on the FAA. But also experienced pilots that are coming from other airlines that are transitioning over to my airline. I fly with those. I do command upgrades training. And I'm also a simulator instructor and an examiner. So I do their actual initial training onto the type as well, which is in a nice big box up in London at the moment.
Yeah, that's gotta be really rewarding as well, because you probably think back to when you were in that position and you had some line training captain teaching you all these things and going through the checks with you.
I mean, you cannot be a good instructor unless you remember how it was to be a student. That's my firm belief. And you need to put yourself in the shoes of these cadets, especially when we're working with people who may be in their early 20s when they're doing their training. But from all ages now, you need to know what they're feeling. You need to know the uncertainty that they're bringing with them, the anxiety of having to learn, so much under such a limited amount of time. And if you don't kind of understand that and remember it, it's going to be hard to be a good instructor.
Yeah, I think the phrase I've heard the most, especially when you get into your type ratings in jet flying, it's really just drinking from the fire hose. There's so much coming at you and you just have to attempt to catch it and absorb it all. So
yeah, it's fascinating actually to see, because we always tell them that you tell them that you are going to have a learning curve that is beyond anything that you've ever come across, and you sit here now not knowing how to properly operate this aircraft, and in 2 months you will know how to operate this aircraft, and you cannot recall how it was not knowing it, and that will happen over a space of maybe 2 to 3 months. So it is very, very intense. You have to live, eat, breathe, think the type rating during the time you do it.
I hope that you have lots of people coming in, especially I feel like the airlines are, starting to ramp back up. I'm sure pilot training is very rigorous and lots of candidates. So, all positive trends here on out.
Yeah, it feels like it's either on or off in this industry. Either it's full 100% charge ahead, or it is brakes on like it was during the pandemic. But now the industry, at least from my standpoint, where I can see the contacts that I have and so on, the industry is starting to realize that there is a generation shift coming up. All of the baby boomers that are disappearing out of the workforce, and to a certain extent did disappear now during COVID, they were supposed to go maybe in 3 years or so. The latest ones would have gone then. But now with the COVID, maybe they were meant redundant and they felt like, no, that's it. I'm just going to leave it here and call it a day. So all of a sudden we've lost those pilots early. And then you also have the fact that a lot of pilots who were made redundant from all over the world during the pandemic had to find another income source during these years. Like you can't go 2 years hoping that you're going to be recalled. So they they got other jobs. They got jobs as, working in banks and doing things like that. And what I've found is that a lot of those, maybe 10-15% of those people, actually enjoy the fact that they're now home and they can go to football practice with their son and they can do all of those things. So they're not coming back. So you have that, you had a pumping aviation business in 2019, working on all cylinders. Everything was working fine. And then you have COVID coming in and just making complete stop to the industry for 2 years. And then it's supposed to be just ramped up and started at the same or even higher level after that. And you're finding out that no, we don't have the people anymore. Hence the kind of mad dash for recruitment that we're seeing now.
Yeah. And I mean, it's probably reciprocated over in Europe as well. We're definitely seeing that on a very large scale here with summer coming up and, travel plans and everything kind of getting back to normal. But let's take it back a little bit and talk about how you got started in aviation, kind of typical love story, got bit by the aviation bug. But I think you have a really unique way that you were, I guess, found the resources to get your private license and move forward. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so I found the goal, like you said, I was bitten by the bug at a very early age, which meant that I could use my early years when I was 14, 15 to try to find the best possible way to achieve my goal. And I found that in the form of a government-sponsored program that we are very fortunate to have in Sweden, or at least I had when I grew up, which is where you apply to this school, completely paid by the government. There was only 30 spots available for every year. But if you are among those lucky 30, then I could, as part of my, I would say, junior college years, I was 17, you could start to train to get your PPL, your CPL, and your instrument rating. And then there was a further course that you could apply to get your MCC and your multi-engine license later on, which is, I was working my butt off for several years to get my grades up high enough to have a chance to come for an interview. And I managed to pass that interview and got into that training, which was a dream come true, would be an understatement.
Yeah, definitely a dream come true. So fast forward, now you are a very young first officer. I think you said you were 23 when you start, right?
I was 20 when I started. Yeah, so I worked for, I managed that. That's another story. Obviously, after you've done your training, you actually need to find a job as well.
Yeah.
and I was done with my training just basically after the 9/11 attacks, which of course devastated the aviation industry globally. Mm-hmm. So it was not easy to find a job, but I managed to find a job in an airline that was expanding heavily at the time. Which is the same airline that I'm in now, by the way. I've stayed there for 20 years, and
which is kind of rare, right?
Very rare, yeah.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Like it is rare, but for several different reasons. So mm-hmm. Sometimes when you join, obviously when you join the industry, you maybe get into a slightly less economically stable airline. Like you might be in a small operation that might shut down at any point, and that tends to be the reason why people hop in the beginning, because an airline goes bankrupt and then you have to mm-hmm. apply for a new one. I've been fortunate to work for a very economically stable airline, and I've also had the opportunity to move around a little bit inside of the airline to do different roles, and they have been very, very good to me. Like I've been very, very happy. And I think that's key, obviously. Otherwise, you keep looking for that other grass that is slightly greener on the other side. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was 20 when I started, and then I worked for a few years as a first officer on the 737, and then I was fortunate enough to snag a job as a synthetic flight instructor, which is a simulator training first officer.
So you, like you mentioned earlier, you are that bright-eyed person, just got all their ratings. Now you're going to do your dream job. You're being mixed with probably an older generation who's been flying and sitting in that left seat for quite a while. What were some of the differences that you remember being compared from before to your time when you're starting?
Well, I mean, what has happened throughout the industry and keeps happening is it becomes more and more efficient, I should say. Mm-hmm. Means the utilization of flight and cabin crew is much higher. You fly more hours, you fly a tighter schedule, fly more routes, so on. So while back in the day you might have done a flight over to somewhere and then you stay there for a while and then you flew back again, now it's more about getting the maximum 900 hours out of each pilot each year. So they felt that the workload had gone up, and with that the salary hadn't kind of gone up in the same way. So I'd say that was probably the most commonly complained about thing.
Yeah, people can be really resistant to change, but it keeps happening, and especially in our industry. I like your point of they just found a way to make it more efficient. In the end, it is a business, and there's always ways to improve on all the ends, so it makes sense.
You see, that's the way to think about it if you want to be happy coming into, I think, any business, but this business in particular, is that you have to understand that even though you come into it because of a passion that you have, you're still coming into a business which is there to make money for shareholders, and they're going to try to do that as efficiently as they possibly can. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it from, I think a lot of pilots coming in, they take it personally, the way that the airlines are handling it. And of course it becomes personal because it is you and your life after all. But I think that everyone is, if you think of it from that perspective and understand, then you at least understand the other side of it. You understand where they're coming from. And then that forms a basis for discussion, where there's going to have to be a compromise between workers and the airline anyway. But if you think that they are in this for the passion like you are, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, no, I get that. And then just kind of reflecting here, looking at our two backgrounds, right? So in my background, I can essentially buzz wherever I want, do get within limits, freedom of flight kind of thing. And with your background, there's a very rigorous process, and you don't go where you want to go, or else you'll probably get in a lot of trouble. So yeah, it's these two different mindsets. And I guess sometimes maybe it could be hard to merge, especially when you get into it for that mindset that I have behind me. So really, really interesting point there.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And this is why the aviation business is so full of different types of jobs that you can do. You can get paid to go out and fly in the bush in Alaska. You can do mail flights at night. You can do cargo, passenger, private jets. There's loads and loads of things that you can do. And I think that whatever you choose to go into and whatever you choose to do, you have to go into it with a realistic mindset of what it is that you are going to do. Because it's when you don't have that, when you go into it, think that my job is going to be to fly in shiny jets and then lie on a beach for 2 days and then fly back again. And then you realize that this is actually hard work. Like I'll be tired when I get home after a long day of work. Then maybe that mismatch in expectations and what you actually get is what causes people to become disappointed. And if you don't have that, if you come into it with your eyes wide open, you can see all of the fantastic benefits there are and the positive things of it. Every time that I set takeoff thrust in the 737, I still feel that feeling I had as a cadet. Like, I can't believe they're paying me for this. And when you fly in over a sunset and you do a 2-sector day with a really nice crew and everything works, it is a fantastic job. Like, it really is.
Yeah, I get that. And so I think this kind of pulls into the point of Mentour Pilot, why you've started this and what you really try to share there. It's not only trying to educate people on how to be better pilots or get into flying, but then also just the expectations of the job. So why did you start this, and how has it kind of progressed since it was created?
Well, I've done it for 7 years, and I started it for exactly the reasons that you just brought up. I felt that there was a mismatch. I felt that there was an opening in the niche for someone to explain a positive side of aviation and a constructive side without being, the pamphlet kind of guy. I wanted to tell them why I loved what I do, but also what the negatives were. Because what I found was, and what I on the internet, like everyone does, and you very quickly find these chat groups and pages where you can meet other pilots like Peter or stuff like that. And what you could find very quickly was that a lot of people were in there to vent their frustration with the job that they had. So instead of, like, I came in, it's like, oh, how is it to work at British Airways? And you'd always find people that were working British Airways said, oh, I don't like it for these reasons, yada, yada, yada. But what I understood after I started it when I'd already been 13 years in the business, was that probably the people that were happy, maybe they weren't in these chat rooms. Maybe they were out, kite surfing or spending time with their spouses or whatever. So what you tended to get was a very skewed picture of what was going on, but you only had people who were displeased. That's why they wanted to vent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I thought, well, I'm going to start something where I speak from my heart about my experience. And I was very clear with that in the beginning, saying that I'm not representative of everyone, not even in my own airline. I can represent anyone else than myself, but I can tell you what I have learned over this time and what my feelings about it is, and what you should be thinking from my experience about when you're about to start your training or when you're getting into an airline. So that's how it started. Initially, it was all about talking to people in your situation that was just about to get into the business. That became popular, more and more popular. I mean, initially it would just be me inside, in front of my iMac, no fancy graphics, no, the audio was terrible, but the message was still and is still true. So it started to grow, and I started to get more and more people watching, and I started to branch out to try to explain different parts of it. And I realized that there's a lot of people out there, passengers, who did not know about the ins and outs of aviation. But me, having been an instructor for so long, had a bit of a knack for explaining those fairly technical things in a reasonably easy way, so that even my mom could understand it. That was my goal. I'm supposed to make a video so that my mom can watch it and understand what I'm talking about. If I do that, most of the people will be able to understand it.
Would you ever test your content and say, "Hey, Mom, watch this"? Does it make sense?
No. She was watching my videos, and if she had questions about it, I knew that there was something else I should have put a little bit more emphasis on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's an art teacher, fantastic woman, but she's definitely not a pilot, and she had never had any interest in it. So that was the target group. Like, okay, I need to be able to explain that to her. And that's how it has been growing. So it's gradually changed into more of like an overview of the business.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I just love that you've obviously put a lot of thought into this to make sure that everyone can understand it, and the way your content has evolved. I know you're getting into a lot of scenario videos where you're taking something that was an accident or just a really situation and trying to break it down so everyone can learn something from it. It's great.
Yeah, so I was very, for a lot of years, I didn't want to go close to accidents or incidents at all, because I didn't feel that I had what it took to properly portray or explain what had happened. But as I started to get a bigger team, and I started to be able to show more things graphically, I also understood that using these sometimes terrible events, the way that we do it in the aviation business is we use them as case studies. We every time that I do recurrent training, we sit down and we have a look at one of these case studies, and we see, okay, what can we learn from this? What is this there that we can make positive out of this horrible event? And I realized that you can do this for the general public as well. You can explain something that they've heard about, they've read in the newspapers, but you go into it, this dissect it down to the details of technically what exactly went wrong. A lot of times there are things like communication, leadership, the crew resource management between the pilots or the cabin crew or air traffic control, and you explain that. And I can do it from the way that I see it. Okay, it's possible that the captain thought like this because I would have thought like that. And by doing so, you demystify the horror, which when you go in and you read a newspaper article about it or you listen to the news, it just sounds horrible. And you get the feeling that this was just these passengers were just flying and then all of a sudden there was a fireball, and that's not the way that these things go. So I wanted to explain that for people who are nervous flyers. Believe it or not, a lot of the people watching are actually nervous flyers. They want to know why this happened. But also because for pilots, there is a lot of learning lessons in here. So you have both the people who just want to know what happened, and then you have people that want to become pilots, that want to get a little bit more, and you even have professionals that want to hear, okay, I've been in a situation like that, this is interesting. So you have the full spectrum of people that will be able to get something positive out of this. Even people I was struggling to try to come up with ways how to explain to someone how a hydraulic system worked, right? How am I supposed to make that interesting for someone to actually be able to listen to it? But I found that if you do it as part of a story where there is a need to understand how the hydraulic system works in order to understand why it failed, now all of a sudden people do listen and they do remember how that hydraulic system works. So it is a very, very powerful learning tool, storytelling.
Yeah, and I think you do a really, really great job of it. I mean, I can only imagine all your students and everyone who comes through your company appreciates everything that you do. And I know all of us watchers of your content get a lot from it. Air disasters may even be coming after you for your content on the accident stuff, but I'll let you figure that one out.
Yeah, no, I really hope that someone gets that they get the positive side out of it. I really do. That was the reason I held it off for a long time, and this is the reason I'm doing it now. But obviously, I've also started my sister channel, Mentor Now, because I realized that Mentour Pilot had kind of warped into a storytelling channel. But I still wanted to talk about current things. I wanted to research and explain, okay, this is how this is impacting aviation. But I can't do that on the Mentour Pilot channel because it's storytelling. So here, I'll be able to do that.
Definitely. Well, Peter, thanks so much for coming on. I hope everyone goes to mentorpilot.com. Just searches you on Google. You'll find your YouTube, the Instagram, the Mentor Now as well. Just immense amount of resources. I think we could all go down a rabbit hole just clicking on one of your channels. So thanks again so much for coming on Between Two Wings.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here.
Of course. And everyone, thanks so much for tuning into this episode Between Two Wings. We'll see you next time.